If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. These are Paul's words in a letter that he's writing to a group of churches. Now, he's writing to a group of people that are used to a world that has a culture of divisiveness. You see, at that time, groups of people were divided. They were divided by wealth. They were divided by class. They were divided by the color of their skin. They were divided by their beliefs. They were divided by their brokenness, and they were divided by their backgrounds. You know, even though it's almost 2,000 years later, it doesn't sound very different from the world we see at times, does it? You see, in the past 2 years, it's almost like a magnifying glass has been over the division that we see in this world. Whether it's division in terms of political ideologies, whether it's division in terms of race and ethnicity, whether it's division in terms of beliefs or how people express them. And we've seen that in our world, haven't we? But for me, it's not just the division that we see, it's the hate and the anger and the violence that goes along with it on either side of the aisle. You see, Paul's writing to a group of people that are living in a world that isn't very much different than ours in terms of division. And it's in the midst of this that he's writing to a group of people that have gone as far to say that Christ is my center, and he writes the words if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. But how is this peace possible? You see, the powerful part of Paul's statement when he says, as far as it is dependent upon you, is the fact that he simultaneously includes everyone that can hear his words in the church. It is a group effort and a group responsibility, and it's just supposed to be a part of an identity of who you say you are, but yet at exactly the same time, he's talking to every single individual. As far as it is dependent upon you. The church is just a group of broken people that have placed their hope in Christ and have found power and forgiveness through him and his word and his resurrection. But it's also made up of individuals, just like you. Individual stories of hope, of fear, of failure, of brokenness, all of those things grouped together in this mass of people that call themselves Christians. And to those people, he says, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. You know, sometimes I feel like it's really easy to get lost in the crowd. Sometimes it's easy to feel like we just blend in, or we don't have a voice, or we're not going to make a difference. And sometimes, unfortunately, that carries over to the world of the church. So sometimes when we hear Paul's words, as far as it's dependent upon you, well, Paul just means the church. As long as the church I go to is actively pursuing peace, as long as they're doing some good stuff in the community, then I can just kind of blend in with the crowd, because Paul doesn't mean that I have to work through my own stuff, does he? You see, I believe that this peace that Paul is talking about, that this peace that Paul is urging us and commanding us to give to the world, is directly tied to the power of forgiveness. There's a story I was reminded of a couple weeks ago. It's a story that actually ties both the power of forgiveness and this peace that Paul is talking about, and it's the story of Zacchaeus. So if you haven't already, whether it's in your Bibles or in your phones, I want to ask you to turn to Luke chapter 19, because in Luke chapter 19, we see what it may look like for Paul's words to be fleshed out a little bit. We see what it looks like for a person to walk in the power of forgiveness. Luke chapter 19, verse 1. Here's what Luke writes. He said, Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector, and he was wealthy. And he wanted to see Jesus, but being a short man, he could not because of the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. Some of you are singing the song in your head right now, aren't you? So Luke describes this man, a chief tax collector, a man who was hated by everyone around him. A man who lived and breathed this division that Paul was talking about a little bit later on. See, Zacchaeus took a job, and he took a role in the community that was divisive. He was representative of the force that had taken over the area. And not only did he collect taxes, but there's an implication here that he went above and beyond, not just to do his job, but to pad his lavish lifestyle that he loved. Zacchaeus wasn't liked. Zacchaeus was hated. Zacchaeus was a traitor to the people there. He was a thief. He was a sinner. And he was the worst of the worst. But something powerful happens in Zacchaeus' story. Something powerful happens that changes the entire trajectory of where his life is headed. It changes the story of a person that everybody would look at and turn the other way, or mutter something under their breath, or look at them with disdain, or look and say, please, as an example of their kids, of who not to grow up like. See, this all changed when he had an encounter with Jesus. And for some of you, what the most important thing you need to hear is this. The fact that Zacchaeus didn't get lost in the crowd. See, verse 5 says, when Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. So he came down and at once welcomed him gladly. Jesus saw Zacchaeus, this man who felt invisible. This man, when he looked into the eyes of other people, they would part their ways, and he saw exactly what he was thought of when he passed other people. They won't even look at me in the eyes. They won't even be near me. They won't make a way for me. He knew exactly who he was in the eyes of other people. But when he encountered Jesus, he wasn't lost in the crowd anymore. You see, the pain and the position and the problems that isolated Zacchaeus They made him feel invisible. But yet it's exactly at that moment that Jesus sees him. Now, some of you in different chapters of your story have felt invisible. Or maybe you felt like you've just wanted to blend into the crowd because you don't want anybody to see you, you don't want anybody to notice you, you don't want anybody to bring it up, you just want to avoid people at all costs. And it's exactly at those moments, in those times, in those chapters at our story where we often can have this idea where we meet Jesus in the midst of those moments. And regardless of what's happening around the world, regardless of our circumstances, whatever's happening in the chapters of our story, whatever pain or problems or ideas are having with us, we need to know and stand firm and actually stand here and celebrate today that Jesus sees us. Even if it feels like nobody else does. Because pain can make you feel isolated and pain can make you feel alone and invisible, but Jesus sees us. And because of that, something changes in Zacchaeus' story. Something is forever different. Something has forever changed. Listen to what it says in verse 7. All the people saw this and began to mutter, "He has gone to be the guest of a sinner." But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, "Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I have cheated anyone out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." See, something happened when he had this interaction with Jesus. He changed. He experienced something so powerful in his story that it led him to walk and continue the progress of pursuing peace. Remember Paul's words? If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, pursue peace with everybody. And that's exactly what we see happening in Zacchaeus' story. This man who had problems too many to number. This man who was carrying pain with him. This man who felt invisible in the world has this interaction with Jesus, and something radical changes in his story. And the next things that we read and hear are that Zacchaeus has changed, and now he's pursuing peace. You know, the reality is this as we sit here today. A lot of things are possible through the power of forgiveness. And I believe that the power of forgiveness is needed to properly pursue peace. I think Zacchaeus found freedom when he had this interaction with Jesus. I think he found freedom from the pain. I think he found freedom from the isolation. I think he found freedom from the fear. He found freedom to discover and become who he was always created to be. Freedom where he didn't have to have these outward things to prove his worth or his significance. Freedom from trying to compile all these things to say, I'm important and I have value and I matter in this world. You see, when he got whatever he got from Jesus, that completely changed in him. And he said, I no longer need this. You see, I think when you and I are talking about forgiveness, a similar exchange begins to happen once we choose forgiveness. This entire series, we began talking about the rhythm of forgiveness. The Lord's Prayer that Jesus said, forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. This idea that forgiveness is a daily rhythm of our lives. It's not something we just ask for when we come to know Jesus. It's something that is supposed to be a rhythm. And Jesus continues that, and he calls us and he commands us to forgive one another. But it is still a choice. And if you and I make the choice of forgiveness and decide each and every single moment or every single day to take a step forward and to move forward through the challenges that come through forgiveness, I think you and I will begin to discover and see things that we can celebrate. I want to share some things that I think happen that we can celebrate when it comes to forgiveness, because these are true in Zacchaeus' story. See, when Jesus has this interaction with Zacchaeus, no longer is Zacchaeus' identity tied to his past. No longer is his identity tied and chained to this moment of pain. What Zacchaeus has done is had this interaction with Jesus, and he has surrendered in humility. And no longer is it about who he was or what he did. It's who he is through Jesus Christ. It's about how he was created and his worth and his value. And now he takes a step forward in that direction. And he doesn't view himself in the mirror, and he doesn't see his worth through the eyes of other people. He sees his worth through God. And he can celebrate that through the power of forgiveness, no longer is his identity tied to his past. That through the power of forgiveness, no longer is his path determined by his pain. You know, pain is powerful. We talked about that last week. But it doesn't have to be the most powerful part of our story. You see, pain, as we talked about last week, will make you say things and do things and become things that you would have never imagined of being or saying or doing in your entire life. But there is something that is exchanged, this power exchange that happened, where I think Zacchaeus took this pain that he had and he trusted Jesus with it to make it something different. And no longer was his path, no longer was his identity, no longer him living there was going to be defined to say, I have something missing in my life and I need to take from other people to fill it. Now his path was going to be determined by the power of forgiveness, and he could celebrate that. It's interesting to me that one of the most greedy men in this story becomes one of the most generous men. And I think that happens as he experiences the power of forgiveness. I think through the power of forgiveness, he can celebrate that he doesn't have to live with the limits of labels. He doesn't have to live with the limit of this is what you did, and you will always be this way in my eyes. You see, for some of us, when it comes to pain and forgiveness, we are limited by the label of the event that took place. I will always be this person. I will always be identified by the pain. I will always be identified by their choice. I will always be identified by that decision. But what Zacchaeus finds is that he can move forward without the limits of those labels. He can move forward with this power now inside of him to say, I am more than just a tax collector. I am more than just a person who did all these wrong things. I am more than just a person who's trapped in this pain or this story or an element in my past. I can be generous. He gets a new label, doesn't he? And he can celebrate the fact that now the chapters of his stories are no longer going to be controlled by chaos. It's not this whirlwind of doubt and fear being supplemented by money anymore. It's not this trying to arrange events or schedules or ideas just to avoid pain or make other people happy. You see, he has something different now. He has something of worth that isn't controlled by his circumstances, and it's not controlled by other people. He now has something that even if the world around him is in chaos, he has something inside of him where he can move forward with peace. You know, I don't know about you. I've heard a lot about the call and the command of forgiveness. I've heard people talking about the choice of forgiveness. Now, I have lived through the challenges of forgiveness, and I still am. But how many of you have ever heard about what it means to celebrate forgiveness? How many of you have ever taken time to say, you know what? I can celebrate this. It's a challenge that I thought of this week. That you and I need to take time during the process of forgiveness to celebrate the power and the progress of forgiveness. Often when it comes to forgiveness, there's only the end goal that is talked about. When it comes to forgiveness, it's often portrayed as this restored relationship or reconciliation or things being completely well. And oftentimes that tricks us into saying, I don't have anything to celebrate until this happens. And we get weighed down by the process of forgiveness, the emotions, the triggers, the pain, the challenges of forgiveness, and it makes us lose sight of all the beautiful things that can be celebrated. There's this idea that maybe pain will still be present, but maybe for you a victory that you can celebrate when you're triggered by the pain is it doesn't throw you into an identity crisis anymore. That triggers may still happen, but it doesn't lead me into a tailspin. That today I actually saw the person that did this and I didn't have violent thoughts, or as many violent thoughts as I used to in my life. I had thoughts, but I didn't move to planning. Maybe we can celebrate that. Maybe a celebration for you today is I'm living in pain and I move this over into the hands of God to entrust him to this. And today I just took one more step in that direction. Zacchaeus took steps, didn't he? Zacchaeus had this interaction with Jesus and he said, you know what? I'm going to give away the things that I used to rely on for my worth and my value. I'm going to give away these idols that I needed to prove that I had worth and value. I'm going to give away these idols that would let everybody know who I am and that I'm still important. Because he began to view the world differently. He began to view the world without his past or the problems or the pain being the main primary filter. See, in the midst of the process of forgiveness, Zacchaeus didn't miss the power and the progress that happens. Do you think that Zacchaeus was perfect after he had this interaction with Jesus? Do you think he struggled at all? Do you think there was pain when he knocked on the door of somebody that he stole from? Do you think that he had this self-talk narrative playing in his head the entire time? How do you think it felt for him to give away the things that used to make him feel so secure? You see, Zacchaeus isn't perfect after this story. But there are signs that he made progress. And how do we know that? Because Paul says, if it is possible, as far as it is dependent upon you, not the you identified by the painful event in your past, not the you that's limited by the labels that other people have put on you because of this thing that has happened. Not the you that's being controlled by chaos, but you, the redeemed you, the restored you, the worthy you, the capable you. The you that Jesus said, you have enough worth and value that even if it's just the one in the midst of the 99, I'm still willing to do the exact same thing for you. The you that God created delicately with a plan and a purpose and desire. And what Paul is saying, as far as it is dependent upon you, live at peace with everyone. It's hard to give away something that I don't have, because then I'm just pretending to have peace. I'm doing it out of a sense of Christian obligation. My pastor told me to do it. I just have to. Well, how do you feel? No. Feelings don't matter. Emotions, you just bury those things deep, deep down, and you just keep doing what Christ has commanded you. Makes you feel all gooey inside, doesn't it? Like, that's not the way it's supposed to be, because it's not the way it's supposed to be. Instead of this, we have this idea where Jesus meets us even where we feel invisible, even when we've taken time to hide ourselves because this pain is so powerful. Jesus meets us there and says, hey, why don't you come down from there? And why don't we have a conversation? I'm going to go to your house, the house that you built with other people's money, the house that was built on your lies, the house that was built by your brokenness and your unbelief. I'm going to enter into that space, and if you allow me to walk through your doors, Zacchaeus, you are going to change, because you're not going to walk out of those doors the same as when you and I walk in. And Zacchaeus finds something there, and I believe that he finds peace that is only possible through the power of forgiveness. He has something inside that's not limited by labels, it's not controlled by chaos or circumstances. He has something that only Christ could give him. And when he comes out of that house, that area, that meeting place with Jesus, he begins to share what he has. I have this picture in my head that the first time he tries to hand money back to somebody, he doesn't let go of it. You experienced that before, right? Where somebody doesn't really want to let go, but then he does. Can I share something with you? Some of you, throughout this entire series, you have made one small choice. You have said, I'm going to remove the power from circumstances I can't control. I'm going to remove the power of my pain, and I'm going to make a choice to trust Jesus with this. It doesn't mean the other person gets off free. It doesn't mean that there's no justice. It doesn't mean that there's no process or that I have to be best friends. It just means that I am going to take it off of things I can't control, things that I can't affect with my power, and I'm going to place them in Jesus' hands, and I'm going to trust him to say, can you start transforming this into something different? And some of you in the past 6 weeks, even if it's just a random, minuscule thought, I probably need to start thinking about this here. You know what? We should celebrate that. Well, I haven't gone through the entire process. No. If you've made one decision, if you've made one step, if there's things that have just become just a little bit clearer, even if forgiveness, you started to understand it just a little bit more, we should pause and we should celebrate the power of forgiveness and the progress that happens. We should celebrate that Zacchaeus came out of the house with this different idea that says, I need to give money to people that have a need. And he may have done it poorly. He may have done it in the worst way possible, but you know what? He had the thought. And that should be celebrated. Not only did he didn't stop there. He said, you know what? The people I've hurt, I'm going to repay them 4 times. He's making progress, and that should be celebrated. And some of you, you're not really working through an event right now, but you may have experienced the forgiveness that comes through Christ. And that should always be celebrated. When you look in the mirror and say, my identity is no longer tied to my past, that I've removed the power from my past to control my identity, and we should pause and celebrate and say, yes. If you have a moment during the day where you say, I don't really want to be controlled by pain, God, could you just meet me here? I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. I don't know how this stuff works. Just meet me here. You should pause and celebrate that. And then after you celebrate, maybe you should share it. That's what Zacchaeus does. That's what Paul urges us to do, if it is possible. As far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Now, there's something powerful when we make a decision to put the pain in Jesus' hands and no longer tie my healing to the person that hurt me. It's powerful. It should be celebrated. So I have a couple of questions for you. I think I have a few questions for you. What do you need to pause and celebrate today? I'm not saying you should throw a party. Maybe you should. Maybe you should go to the dollar store and buy some of those little poppers with streamers, just because. Maybe today you need to pause, even if it's just for a moment, and quiet out all these other voices that are fighting for your attention and celebrate the one voice that says, you are mine and I see you. Maybe you need to celebrate the fact today that because you made the choice of forgiveness in one place, that you may not have arrived at the end, but you've made progress, and you need to celebrate that. You need to celebrate that even if it's just for a moment you think differently, even if you look in yourself in the mirror and you say, you know what, I'm not exactly this. You need to pause and celebrate that. Some of you have made so much progress because you made a choice where you've gone to the study on Monday nights, or you're reading the book on your own, or you're just here today in the midst of all this adversity and other choices of things you could have done. You're here today. Celebrate that. You know, I have been participating in Grief Share on Thursday nights here. And it's just a group of people that have gathered that have lost someone close to them, and we watch a video and we just talk. And it wasn't until I took a week off and came back this past Thursday that I realized that even though I usually just sit there and don't say much, there's been a lot of progress. It doesn't mean I'm over it. It doesn't mean that I've completed my journey, but you know what it looks like for me? That I'm just aware of different things. And I'm asking different questions. And I'm feeling different ways. I still have a long way to go. But I need to pause and celebrate that. Because that means that God is starting to work with this jumbled, messy thing that I've kept hidden, the thing that I've tried to drown and avoid with so many different things in my life. I can celebrate that here today. And my guess is that you have something you can celebrate too. A choice you made. A choice you didn't make. So what is that? The things we celebrate in our life get repeated. You ever notice that? Things you encourage and praise a child for are generally the direction that they're going to go and things that they're going to be leaning towards. So maybe you just need to celebrate you for a moment. And my other question is this. We've asked this entire series. What is something that you need to make the choice of forgiveness with? We've talked about it for 6 weeks. What is it? And maybe, listen, maybe you need to choose it every week. Maybe it's not just, well, I said this last week. The reality is this: the pain and the problems, it's easy to put those on the back burner. It's easy to lose sight of them. It's easy to lose sight of the things you thought and felt from last week. There's been over 126 hours since the last time that we met. So maybe today the best thing you can do is focus on that thing again, whatever it is, that person, that event. What is that? As far as it's dependent upon you, if it's possible, live at peace with everyone. Maybe you need to trust Jesus with forgiveness and remove the power of the things that it has in your story from this person or this event, and you need to place it in the hands of Jesus and trust Him to transform it. Maybe that's the only step you need to take today. Maybe that's the most important step. But what is something or someone that you need to choose to begin the process of forgiveness with? Because it's powerful. And there's so many things that are possible through the power of forgiveness. Things that we can celebrate every single day. Would you pray with me? Father, I thought honestly it would be easier to talk to you about this idea of forgiveness. But the reality is, even after 6 weeks of talking through it and reading your words and being challenged and going through the beauty of your presence throughout the process, the reality is that it's still tough. And pain is powerful. But Father, would you help us today, right here today, just as we are, the things that are making us feel invisible or whatever the case is, Father, I pray for your presence with every single person here. I pray that your Spirit would just flood this place, that it would flood their hearts and their minds, and that the people would be able to understand that you are present with them, whatever process they are going through forgiveness. Father, help us to rely on your power, and Father, help us to pause today and remember to choose to celebrate the things that happen through the power of forgiveness. Whether that is something with our identity, whether that's something with the pain that we now is different, Father, help us to simply celebrate the things that happen through the power of forgiveness. And after we celebrate it, help us to begin to understand what it means to share those things with other people. To walk in this world in the power of forgiveness rather than having things and our path be determined by pain. And we ask all of this in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen.